Let's see, can we please take roll? Can,
Greg Poshman,
Here.
Nancy Jacober, David Knight, Dieter Schindler, Tori,
Here.
Sam Rose,
Here.
thank you, Colin Laird, and Baumfach, Jeannie McQueenie,
Here.
Kathy Chandler Henry, Shelley Kaup, Ingrid Busow, Art Riddle,
Here.
Randy Copeland, Alyssa Shank,
Great, we have a quorum. Thank you. Okay, and the first item on our agenda this morning is the approval of the minutes. Has everybody had a chance to read the minutes from the September meeting?
Quick question for staff. So I was looking through the minutes and there were motions, but there was no discussion included, or have we changed how we present that?
Yes, Colin, I believe that we have a truncated minutes. That's something that we can discuss if there would be a desire to have more in-depth conversation captured within the minutes. We can do that. We do also have a video of the board meeting
that,
that's on the website as well.
Yeah.
That can be reviewed.
The only reason I brought that up, is that when we were discussing some of the last mile information, there were some comments and suggestions that are not reflected.
We're not
in the
captured.
minutes.
Okay.
And, you know, I'm totally sympathetic to the going through everything and writing it out. But especially if there were some suggestions related to an issue or how we move it forward, just so we capture it, would be really helpful.
Right.
That
Agreed.
would be my comment.
Thank you, Colin. Any other comments?
Make a
Yes.
motion to approve.
Okay, motion to approve by Greg, second by Tori. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimous. And Colin, I think it's hard to find that balance, so maybe staff can
Absolutely.
continue to
Yep,
work on
yep,
it.
Totally agree.
Okay, next, public comment. Do we have anyone from the public this morning that would like to make comment on an item that's not on the agenda? Anyone online? I don't see any hands up or anything, so no public comment.
Thank you.
Okay. And next, any items to add to the agenda or board member comments this morning? Kurt?
Yes, Madam Chair, we would like to pull consent agenda item A off of the agenda for today. Did identify that there were some errors in that submission and that there's some revisions needed for it. So we'll bring that back next month.
Great. So we will pull item 5A from this morning. And any other, Greg?
I just wanted to make the comment that coming down this morning, I saw really congested traffic or gridlock pretty much all the way to Catherine's store where I turned off. It was
100%.
shocking. It was shocking that we have a parking lot that stretches all the way from Carbondale to Aspen now. And it just underscores the necessity of RFTA and growing and moving RFTA forward. And I'm hoping that that's enough. I'm not sure it is, though. It's just kind of, it's the realization that I think the population bomb fallout has arrived here. And so I just wanted to say, if we ever need reaffirmation that RFTA is an important, essential service here, I saw it today. I took pictures. Thank you.
I agree. I think my mouth was like open the whole time I was going, and
I gave, yes.
I was like, oh my gosh, it's going and it's going and it just wasn't stopping. So, yeah, I mean, Tori and I were talking before, we're like, if you had to do that every day, which some people are, I mean, it's insane. Yeah. And I know there was an accident, so that didn't help things, and it was down to one lane. It was closed and then it was down to one lane at parts, but still, there seems every day that there's some kind of accident on 82 that's closing part of it. And yeah,
Right.
it was shocking.
Just to follow up on that, the thing that I contemplate a lot now is that we're a community of about 120,000+ people, and we have to think of it that way, because
Yeah.
clearly everyone's moving all around the valley, both directions. And we have to think in those terms, because we're not little towns of 5,000 or 6,000 in bucolic rural settings any longer. We're crowded towns in bucolic rural settings. Thanks.
Right. Thank you. Thanks, Colin.
Well, I just wanted to add that it doesn't stop at Carbondale. It goes all the way down through Glenwood Springs and out along the Colorado River Valley. So this, to Greg's point, this is a massive regional challenge. I attended a meeting of local elected officials hosted by the town of Silt last night, and it was very nice, and transportation came up a number of times as something they want to explore and move forward. So the timing's good, and clearly RAFT is in a great position to strategically do more to address some of these issues. I don't know that it'll ever go away, but I think one of the big challenges RAFTA faces right now is the RAFTA buses are stuck in that traffic.
Mhm.
And what do we do about that?
Absolutely.
Can I share one more short
Big
thing?
challenge.
I just want to congratulate our competitor over in the Eagle Valley, who now has 1/3 of their buses are electric. They are just going so quickly and building this incredible system over there so well that I just wanted to congratulate you all.
And it's pretty. If you've not seen our logo, it's really pretty.
Oh, nice. Tori.
I just wanted to add a little color to this as well, because a lot of conversation around this for years, if not decades, has focused on the entrance to Aspen as being the issue. I think now it's becoming apparent to people that the 1/3 of a mile between the roundabout and Main Street of Aspen is not the full cause of the traffic and congestion that we see. So I agree, it is more of a regional situation and issue than it is just focused on that small stretch of the highway.
Absolutely. Thanks, Tori. I have a comment to add. I certainly agree with everyone. And it highlights how important this work is and the regional collaboration. And I'd just like to say this will be my last meeting. And I really appreciate working with all of you. It's been such a pleasure. So I wish you all the best going forward and working on these important issues, because it's so important. And as we see, it continues to grow, but there's also a lot of passion and a lot of hope in working towards building a better transportation system. So my Erin Zielinski just arrived, and I wanted to introduce her to the board. Erin, this is the RAFTA board.
I'm sorry for my tardiness.
That's
We
okay.
had fingers in a tour of my neighbor's pets down.
Oh, no.
That's a pass. Easy
Without
pass.
physically being able to pick it up, so I was like,
Oh, gosh.
so my apologies.
Oh, no worries. But so Erin will be stepping in as the Glenwood Springs RAFTA.
I had one more thing. I was thinking we'd do this at the end, but it's more appropriate to do this at the beginning, only because there's a gavel associated with this. And I think the chair should be able to use this gavel, at least once for her last meeting. And so the board would like to present this to board and staff, put this together. This is in appreciation for services, Chair of the RAFTA Board of Directors, presented to Shelley Cup. It comes with your own gavel.
I've never had a gavel. So.
And if I could, I wanted to say that, I only learned last night after looking at Shelley's biography that we both went to CU engineering school, graduated at the same time in December of 1983, which dates us.
That's amazing.
And there are only one or two women in the entire engineering school. So I'm sure I'd had seen you from a distance at least, because I was much too shy to talk to anyone. But anyway, it's just so fantastic to hear about this. And I want to say, since we're here doing this, Shelley has a BS in civil engineering, an MS in sustainable engineering from Villanova. I had no idea I was in the presence of somebody who'd gone so much farther in engineering than I had. And so I want to read this. Thank you. Today, I have the honor of recognizing and thanking one of our esteemed RFTA board members, Shelley Kopp, for her outstanding service and leadership, especially during her time on the RFTA board as chair over the last year. The significant progress in sustainability and innovation include the zero emission vehicle plan while you were on the board, successful adoption of the climate action plan, setting RFTA on a course toward more sustainable future. And also under Shelley's leadership, RFTA has been awarded substantial grants this year, including 15.5 million grant for the new electric transit vehicles, trying to keep up with Eagle over here, $32.8 million grant for phases 6A, 6B, and 8 of the Regional Transit Center project. And these funds will drive vital improvements to RFTA's fleet and infrastructure, ensuring RFTA remains a leader in sustainable transportation. You helped RFTA develop our strategic plan with new objectives that will guide RFTA over the next 5 years. So your impact will be felt long beyond your tenure here. You also helped ensure the launch of the 27th Street Underpass project, improving the safety and efficiency for riders for RFTA in Glenwood. And RFTA has been recognized by the FTA as climate change champions, and your contributions have certainly helped with that. So thank you for your dedication and leadership. And it's just I'm just so proud to serve on a board with people like you on it. So thank you. Yeah. I'd intended to do this later, so it was a little rough there, but thank you. We got it out.
Well, and thanks again to all of you. Everybody worked on this together. This is such a great board, such a regional board, and staff is phenomenal, and with moving forward all of these new strategic plans, there's a great future for RFTA going forward. So thanks to all of you. It's been a pleasure. Okay, well, maybe I'll use this at the end of the meeting. Okay. For any time? Okay. If anybody gets out of line. All right. Any other board comments? Okay. So we're skipping 5A. So let's move on to presentation and actions. For 6A, we have a resolution in support of Pickens County ballot issue 1A. And it sounds like Kelly Nicholas will be here to present that item. Educate us all on that. Okay.
Okay, good morning. Thank you all. I'm Kelly McNicholas Curry. I'm a Pickens County Commissioner, and it's nice to see you all. I don't generally come to the RFTA meetings because it's so well covered by Francie and Greg, but I'm really happy to be here today. And I'm here representing the campaign to vote yes on 1A in Pickens County that is supporting this ballot measure and requesting your resolution of support. And so I'm just going to do a few-minute presentation here to talk about how we got here and what it contains and entails. And I'm happy to answer any questions. So we all know here, I know you all have lots of conversations about the demand for housing, so I'll be pretty quick through all of this. But Pickens County imports about 60% of our workforce. And, this has far-reaching impacts for our community, as you all discussed about the traffic today and the impacts related to that. The BOCC is asking for a new housing tax because we have very limited financial capacity to make any significant efforts on or successes on housing. and look to participate in the construction, conservation, and conversion of new affordable housing. We've been invited to partner on projects. In the past, we've had to decline those invitations because we simply don't have a reliable revenue source on which to pay for them. And we very directly experienced the impacts from the COVID pandemic and the pressure on the housing situation with the boom in the real estate market. Some people's values tripled overnight and some people's rents tripled overnight. We've also heard time over time in our biannual surveys from the community that has said that they want us to do more work on affordable housing. So here, these results have shown us that the highest priority issue is efforts to address affordable housing. And we ranked 10th out of 12 in our success on working on that issue. And so that has shown us we should do more. We should ask the voters if they are willing to support money so that we can do more. This slide is a little out of date on the right-hand side, but on the left-hand side, you can see our median annual wage for a worker is $50,000 a year, which is hardly sufficient to be able to afford any rental or ownership units. On the right here, it says this median listing home price is $3 million. When we pulled out the fractional ownership sales, it actually goes up to $7 million for a home in Pickens County. You've all seen this slide in the past, but this shows the declining availability of affordable homes in both the Roaring Fork Valley and the Colorado River Valley that your region serves. Here's sort of a general housing continuum. This plays out in all communities around the country. For Pickens County, our area median income for a two-person household is $91,000, which somewhere else might put them in the market for a first-time home ownership. That is not attainable in Pickens County. And what we're actually seeing is pressure on the upper middle incomes in our free market rental availability. So folks who should be in home ownership typically are now in rentals. And so that is putting a squeeze on the rental market for all other income levels. No one in Pickens County can afford free market home ownership, and only high income earners can afford free market rentals. And this is particularly difficult for our lower income workers, which with an annual median wage of $50,000 is a bulk of our population. So we're hoping to conserve the housing that we do have and keep our local workforce in existing housing, convert free market housing into affordable housing, and construct some new housing, ensure it's affordable. Right now, we do have some funding sources in the county. We collect an employee housing mitigation fee on new and expanded development or expanded uses by commercial owners that generate new employees. We recently upped our rules a few years ago to require that that is paid at 100%. We used to only require folks to pay up 60%. So we're collecting a little bit more of that, but it's very elastic and dependent on building permits. And then we also have our general fund, and there's a lot of pressures on our general fund. That's where our services like public safety come out of. And so for 2025, we are budgeting $2.6 million into our housing fund, which is some money. You can do a few things, but you can't really make a big dent in the problem. We are asking for a property tax because counties are very limited in the types of revenues that we can raise. We can't raise a real estate transfer tax, which is prohibited in Tabor. We can't levy a head tax, which would be like an employee fee for businesses to pay based on the number of employees they have. We can't do an excise tax on any luxury type purchases. We can't pass a vacancy tax, and we can't pass a tax on targeted properties. So for example, we couldn't say, well, the real estate market pressure is coming from, second homeowners. We should put property tax on them. We don't have those authorities. We can raise a property tax and a sales tax, and a sales tax tends to be regressive and puts more pressure on those who are least able to pay. We think that a property tax is the right solution out of the choices that we have because it links the solution to the problem. You know, like I mentioned, the burgeoning real estate market has made it harder for us to provide housing for people in the community. Pickens County has the second lowest tax mill levy in the state. Colorado has the third lowest property tax burden in the country. And those, I spoke about the rest of that. So here, this yellow line is the amount that we landed on. Raising 8.5 million a year is what we're asking for in a 1.5 mil. And that would equate to about $10 a month on $1 million home or $36 a month on a $1 million commercial property. Our goal is to generate 250 new units over 10 years. And we have multiple ways that we want to do that. We want to construct some new properties that we would do some of that as our own projects, and we would do much more of that in partnership with partners such as RFTA, hopefully. We've been invited to partner with the town of Snowmass Village on the build out of their affordable housing plan. We have been in conversations with Eagle County related to our first right of refusal that we share on a property in Elgibel. And we have our Phillips Curve project underway. We also want to put money towards buy downs. We've already dedicated some funds to the West Mountain Regional Housing Coalition to do that, as well as partnered with Habitat just last week on their buy down in Glenwood Springs of the L3 complex. We hope to expand the type of partnerships and leverage our success on projects like Basalt Vista, where we brought in school district, town of Basalt, Ski Co, and do more of that and invite even small businesses to come and partner with us who maybe don't want to be developers or don't have enough money to really make a dent, but they can perhaps buy a unit in an equity stack. We also want to put some money into a very first of its kind capital reserve program where we can maintain the affordable housing that we have. You know, if there's one thing in the housing space I think everyone agrees on, it's that we have to preserve what we already have. And so we have properties that are reaching end of life. They're 40 years old. They need some serious maintenance, and there's no dedicated money to do that. We also want to use a small portion towards homelessness solutions. We have a real gap in our homelessness continuum for transitional and supportive housing. These are the folks that are, you know, ending up in jail, ending up in the hospital. These are not appropriate places for them. And we want to be able to provide some units and wraparound services to house them. We also have decided by listening to our constituents and wanting to be really thoughtful in how we dedicate this money to prioritizing what we're calling critical community service workers. And so this is the public safety workers, transit drivers and workers, snowplow drivers and road and bridge, healthcare workers, our human service responders like adult and child welfare staff, and teachers and childcare educators. So as we apply this money into an equity stack, we want our units to get sort of filled with this workforce first. And we also, if that survey I showed earlier in the presentation, the second most important issue to constituents of Pickens County is protecting rural character and managing growth. And so we have explicitly committed in the ballot language to putting housing in areas where services and employment already exist. So I hope you will support this, and we hope it creates more opportunities to partner with RFTA and others in the community. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Great. Thank you so much, Kelly.
Thanks,
Thank
Kelly.
you. Do we have any questions this morning on that issue? Greg?
I just wanted to comment. Thank you, Kelly. That was really good. I love it when she makes this presentation. It's very clear. The only thing you didn't say at the very end was part of the priority modern planning principles include putting the density near the transit. And I think that's super important. It means working inside the urban growth boundary when possible, certainly along transit routes. And it feels really good to be supporting this. And thank you for all the work you've done on it.
Well, as Town of Snowmass Village at our meeting on Monday, we unanimously voted to, be in support of the resolution as well. And I have been helping Kelly, and we have been campaigning, and, in Snowmass anyways, I I've heard a lot of very positive feedback. I would say the only negative that I've really heard recently is that I feel like a lot of people who came to Snowmass and Aspen in the 70s and 80s and bought their homes, and now it's harder for them to stay in their homes because they can't afford their mortgages and they can't afford the property taxes and things like that. And I think that's the one concern I have heard. But other than that, I think people also realize the importance of housing. And I know in Snowmass, we have a big project coming down the pipe and, in Aspen. And I think that it could really go a long way to sort of helping meet those needs in those communities. So, yeah.
Great. Any other questions or comments?
No, I would just like to thank the county commissioners for putting this on the ballot. I think it's really, really important that we start funding affordable housing as much as we possibly can. And I would like to thank the county for their efforts with CCI to push on some of the things that counties are not allowed to do. Because there's a lot of things that could be in our toolbox that, such as a RET, that we're not allowed to use, which does not seem to make any sense. It's not going to be used everywhere. It's only going to be used in places where housing is a serious problem. And I just thank you to the commissioners for pushing on that. I know CAST, we're a member of CAST and we're pushing on it as well. And we're talking to CML today. So we'll see where it goes. But this is an ongoing effort. This is not going to solve the issue, but I really appreciate what the county's trying to do to be a bigger partner. So thank you.
Great. Thank you, Colin. So we do have a resolution.
I would like to make a motion to approve resolution 2024-17, support for Pickett County ballot issue 1A, affordable and workforce housing mill levy.
Thank you, Tori. Do we have a second?
Yeah.
Has seconded the motion. Do we need a roll call vote on this?
We're not spending money.
We're not spending money, so we don't. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for knowing.
Okay.
Roll call when you're
Are there any other comments? I don't see any hands up online or anything like that. So I will call the question. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion passes unanimously.
Thank you all. I appreciate your.
Thanks
so
so
much.
much.
Thank you.
And next on the agenda, we have a second draft of the 2025 RFTA budget for update and discussion. Paul Hamilton. That does not.
I'm
look like
sorry,
Paul.
I know. Disappointment. So
We're never
David Carl,
disappointed.
I'm an accountant with the RFTA finance team. I kind of specialize in budgets. Might have seen me before.
Okay, thank you, Gabe.
So our ultimate goal today is kind of just look at where we're at in the first draft and where we're at today in the second draft. And we're going to start to go through the presentation. A lot of the same format last time, but our ultimate goal here is really to highlight the changes. Quick agenda, transit service plan. We did do some slight modifications. We'll kind of overview our challenges, issues, and opportunities. Look at where we're at, financial overview with the revenues, expenses, staffing. One of the things we are going to highlight a little bit is the strategic initiatives that have been included in this draft, and then major goals and where our fund balance is looking like. So our ridership. So one of the things we did do a slight modification. We'll look at hours and miles. We're still projecting to pass 5 million riders for the 2025. We're going to closely approach that. As you notice, just the trend going up, obviously a lot of it going back in time from COVID. 2021 was a year that we were released on the restrictions of the seating capacity. Let's go ahead and jump over to hours. One of the things in the second draft, the first draft, we kind of looked at an overall transit service plan. The second draft, we're looking at comparable to more to the 2024 plan itself. So we're really seeing everything's pretty flat across the board. Same thing on our miles. It's always interesting when you go back we always go back in time a little bit, but when we had to have all those backup buses with the seating capacity, and you see that big jump there back in 21. So as we're looking at our challenges, a couple things really focusing in on the construction projects. Big shout out to Mike Christensen's team, especially Dustin Goodman. We've really been fine tuning, especially these new projects that we have no historical data on. And that's our Glow maintenance facility, the expansion project, as well as the underpasses, as well as Iron Mountain Place. So a lot of work's going through there. We continue to refine as we get closer into that third draft. The housing policies, program and considerations, we're looking at a little bit of the housing stipend, the rent structure, part of the EPS recommendations, the legislation for property taxes. As we've gotten more guidance, especially from bond counsel, what we're looking at here is there's not really going to be any impact in the 2025 budget year. So how the legislation is looking like it's going to work. It's the 2025 tax year, which would be collections in 2026. With that, we'll see the impact. And probably right now, what we're seeing is the impact's going to be the restriction on growth of the property tax. That will have to start to factor in our long-range planning. Economic indicators, a lot of as we get information from all the jurisdictions, whether it's sales tax or the assessors on the property tax, and just general feel as things are going forward. Insurance premiums, I guess one good thing. As we looked at health insurance, we were at 16% in our first draft. As we've gone through a lot of the changes, we're looking at a 12% increase on health insurance. A lot of work was done with, shout out to Megan Fakney and the HR team and all the looking at so many different plans and trying to figure out what's best for RFTA and RFTA's employees. And so just dropping from 16% to 12%, roughly that's gonna be like $130,000 deduction in costs. Alongside that with business insurance, obviously everybody's seeing a big growth there. We're seeing about a 22% increase. Now that's gonna be twofold. One is just the overall general increase, roughly about 16%. Now we're adding in some new assets, which is kind of covering that difference to get to the 22% increase. And obviously the ongoing collective bargaining agreement. As we're looking at our second draft, so this is just high level, where are the revenues at? Right about 92 million. That's a slight reduction, about 400,000 from the first draft. And some of that's just coming down through really property taxes and some slight modifications. The other financing sources, 18.2, we'll look a little bit more at our capital as well as our strategic initiative. That's just a lease purchase for 13 new coach buses. Expenditures at 103.1 million. That's a 21 million increase. And we'll get into that a little bit further as we talk about strategic initiatives. And then, so this kind of nets out to 6.8 million. Just looking at when we talked about last, like how many of the committee, the leadership committee on the strategic initiatives, there was close to over $101 million of strategic initiatives were presented. In this draft right now, the first draft, we did have about 5 million that was included. We're up to 27.8 million of strategic initiatives included in the second draft. So if you compare that to the overall 100 million plus, right now that's 27%. So we're going to talk a little bit further down about some of the other high priority strategic initiatives not included thus far, which does really come out to be about $64 million in expenditures, which a lot of is capital, talking about phases 6A, 6B, phase 8. And then if we roll over to this next slide, financial overview is just kind of laying everything out by the different fire funds, from the general fund, our service, special revenue funds, as well as the debt service fund. Again, from last time, as we're looking at our revenues, 2/3 of RFTA's revenues comes from sales, use tax, as well as property tax. So not a lot of variations from the first draft. If we're looking at, so in 2025 for our sales tax, the good thing is nobody's looking at negative growth on the sales tax. So everything's positive right now. It's either flat or positive. So we had a few changes going forward. I guess just from RFTA's perspective, 2026, I think for all our jurisdictions, we don't know what's going to look like. Obviously, some of the information out there could be slower growth moving forward. One thing when we look at the very bottom is our sales tax on the graph, kind of I forget what Mr. Michael Yang called the color. Salmon. Salmon. Ginger. Salmon or ginger. So one of the things as we look at kind of the growth factor, just looking at when we go from 21 to 22 in our sales tax, we were looking like a 15% growth. And then everything since, then it went down to 4% to 1%. So roughly we're looking at about a 2% growth over this year. So everything's getting a little more flat on growth on this side. One of the things to note from the 24 budget now does include the 15.5 million grants for the battery electric buses. But everything, and really the kind of the story right now is we're seeing a lot of slower growth on the revenue side. One thing we did incorporate, which was presented last time, was a potential decrease of 10% restraint from Garfield County for the hogback service, primarily going from the Newcastle to Rifle section. This is just highlighting the overall. So the cost of that is roughly $900,000. Later this month, Kurt will be presenting to the board the formal request, which will be the $797,000. We're looking at right now, when we talked about that 10% decrease. So Garfield County is contributing $605,000 for 2024. So that would put it down at $544.5. Ultimately, and the Cedar Rifle contributes $40,000. So right now that shortfall for that service is $212,000. So a lot of work was done by the operations team, Ian Adams' team, to go, what would that really mean if we were going to try to eliminate that shortfall on the expenditure side? Well, that would be 7 daily trips. And what that equates to daily is 120 passengers per day. So obviously our goal is reducing how many people are on the road, get them on buses. So at this point, RFTA is really recommending that we cover that shortfall to go through. And then if we can move forward just to the next, that kind of highlights a little bit of just kind of a year over year. So if we go back to 2020, so the blue is what Garfield County contributed. The yellow was ultimately the request. And there is a little bit of a timing issue between what's approved and the actual request. Now, when we go back to 2020, obviously there's some variations because of COVID. So if you go from 2020 to 2021, obviously Garfield County contributed a little bit more than what was requested, which we applied into the 2021 shortfall. 2022 was flat. So if you kind of looked from 21, we're at 500,000 contribution came in from Garfield County. 2023, our costs started rising a little bit. You see that gap between the yellow and the blue. Garfield County did increase up to 550,000. 2024, the cost in the additional service is going up obviously quite a bit in 2024. Garfield County increased up to the 605,000, which was happening in 2024. And then as we get into 2025 with that. So ultimately just looking at that gap between the service, what RFTA is requesting to what's right now. So we are hopeful that that amount in 2025, that difference, hopefully will be mitigated some, but that's kind of what it looks like right now in our budget.
If I could also add here, what's driving, if you look at this chart, how you see in 2020, the contribution from Garfield County and the request from RFTA were higher, it dipped down. That's because during the pandemic, we had to reduce the service levels on that service. So that's why you're seeing the dip down. And then now we're coming back up to what we were providing prior to the pandemic. Yeah.
Yeah. As we analyze the information, one of the things we want to point out, like what David mentioned, there's about 7 trips. If we were to modify the service, that would reduce the total. I think there's 20 daily trips right now, and it would reduce it by 7. That when looking at the ridership, as you would imagine, a lot of that ridership being picked up in that segment ultimately is getting off at somewhere in Glenwood Springs. And some of them, there's a portion of the commuters that stay in Glenwood Springs or actually transfer and go further up Valley. So as you alluded to earlier this morning, there's like all the traffic and that's the movement of the people, right? So the folks that would be impacted would be the workforce of the businesses that are in our area. So just want to share that. That's why that staff's recommendation to continue to provide the same level of service. As you can see, the ridership is, the projection is to continue at over 200, around 200,000 a year. And this is the highest, if you looked at RFTA's recovery of its ridership, the hogback service is that one that stands out in terms of the highest growth rate in terms of just the popularity of that service. So just want to add that context.
Quick question, just to clarify, looking at the projection for 2025, and is that the $212,000 difference we're looking at on the far right of that? Is that, I just want to make sure I'm squaring it up and understanding that.
Yeah, that's correct.
And is the request still gone out to Garfield, and are they still contemplating it, or are we certain that that's the funding level?
So yes, what RFTA has requested from Garfield County is the amount that reflects the 700 and I believe 97,000. But we have received notice from Garfield County that they're likely going to be reducing their prior year contribution rather than increasing to match what we're asking. So at this point, we're anticipating a reduction. I will be speaking with the Garfield County Board of Commissioners on October 22nd, making this request, so we'll know more at that time.
Great, thank you.
And keep in mind, Rifle is, we requested this $40,000 contribution from them. They're also, they also have been financially contributing to the service. So that's something that we put forward to them. So once that conversation happens with Kurt and the Board of County Commissioners, we'll see how that goes later this month, and then we'll provide an update to the RAP board on this.
If I could, go ahead. I just wanted to, if I, quick follow-up, only that Garfield County isn't here to defend themselves or support their decision. And I just want to say, I understand that this year's revenue from what's it, mineral extraction is projected to be down substantially. So they're looking at a huge decline in revenues. So it's not stinginess without necessity behind it. And I just want to say that it would be great to understand that better. Only what I read in the paper, but it'd be nice to really understand their situation and how they foresee dealing with it, because we anticipate mineral extraction revenues to continue to drop. Thanks.
Thanks, Greg. That's.
Now, just moving forward, as we looked at our expenditures, just going across, there's a couple changes on this chart from last time. Obviously, the percentage just changed as we added in the capital outlay. So that's going up to 22.8 million. During the first draft, there was just 3 million presented in there. Another thing is we broke out first and last mile mobility. That's the 4%. The $4.3 million. So that really encompasses our regional bike share, the operating as well as capital portions of it, and our FLMM grant contributions. Looking at our 5-year expenditure comparison, just a couple, we
Yes.
kind of,
Hi, I'm calling from Red River Health here in Bridgeville this morning. How you doing?
I'm doing well, thank you.
so just looking at our 5-year, if we just kind of look at, obviously we had higher growth of our, especially the bottom, the salmon color from 21 to 22, that was like a 10% growth. And then 22 to 23, 14, then went up 20%. A lot of this was a little bit of the catch up with wages across the board. Obviously during the pandemic years, the supply chains, the inflationary impacts. Now we're looking roughly going into 2025 with some of these changes we made, where it's about 4.5% from the 25 budget to the 24 budget.
Yeah, to elaborate on that comment. In, if you recall, in 2023, RFTA had shored up, RFTA took bold efforts to increase bus operator wages. We've applied those wage increases mid-year in 23. Since then, that helped stabilize RFTA's bus operator workforce so that we could deliver the services reliably. And so 2024 was the first full year of those higher costs. So that's why I just want to explain that jump from 23 to 24. Thank you.
And then one other thing to know is you look at the 24 budget to the 24 forecast, that difference between, especially if you look at the top green, obviously there's difference in timing. So probably the biggest is we do have in the 24 budget about $60 million for the 10 battery electric buses. That will take place and we'll probably have delivery in 26, if not late 25. So some of that difference in the forecast, some of the bigger line items will show things like that.
Yeah, just want to make sure that, thank you, Kurt. As you know, like in 2023 and 2024, RFTA is making very significant investments in capital. That's not only captured in there was the improvements to the GMF in phase 2 for the vehicle maintenance area, but also this year we're wrapping up a very significant project for the operations center in Glenwood at the GMF. And that is, if you recall, that is pretty large project, larger than what we've spent on BRT. But that is an investment in just making sure that all those buses out there have the indoor storage. It helps provide a better working environment for the staff that work from the GMF. There's a lot of improvements on the driver's area for their belongings, their break areas, their just everything with the operations aspect of RFTA. So that's a huge, I just wanted to share, like, RFTA's made so much progress on that, thanks to Ben Ludlow and his team, and also incorporated in those green colors for 24, include those 10 battery electric buses. So those are things I just want to highlight. So while we have been recovering with our services, we've also been spending a lot of money to invest in our infrastructure.
Thank you, Michael.
Going down the same lines, we look at our capital expenditures, what's included in the second draft. The first line item, the 18.2 million, that's for 13 coach bus replacements. As we've done in past budgets, right now we're anticipate going through lease purchase proceeds. So these buses would be ordered in 25 with delivery in 26. RFTA is actively pursuing grant opportunities for these. And so if those do come, like we got the last $15.5 million grant, we'd recognize that grant revenue and reverse out the lease proceeds. If I could add, I just want to highlight this one item because it stood out to me in our budget. So we do have the need to replace 13 of our coaches, which are the big buses, and similar to the Greyhound style bus. Unfortunately, there is not a manufacturer in the US that provides a battery electric or even compressed natural gas coach bus. This was factored into our vehicle transition plan. So the plan that we all adopted, it was identifying and recognizing that we would have to buy these initial buses as diesel, primarily because there's no other options right now currently in the market. So, but I just wanted to note that that was factored into the vehicle transition plan for zero emission.
Question, Kurt.
Sure, Craig.
Do these buses not exist anywhere, or is it just that a U.S. manufacturer is the criteria? Because I'm wondering if BYD makes something like this, but it is cost prohibitive due to tariffs, or it's just a policy not to buy Chinese, or where are we with this?
Right. So if we're going to be using any federal funding, which is what we intend to use for all of our bus purchases, we do have to comply with Buy America. So we do have to purchase vehicles that are manufactured in the United States and meet that Buy America status.
So the cost would actually be more than twice as much more if we would try to do a foreign, bus system. So not advocating for it, just wondering where we are in the environment. Thanks.
Probably the other larger capital expenditure on this second draft is the ERP implementation that would encompass the HCM, the human resource piece, as well as the finance piece.
Yeah, just wanted to remind, I know this was an item that RFTA staff had spoken about during the audit subcommittee meeting this past June. And I believe that we had Melissa and Tori participated in that discussion, and this was brought up. This is a large project that we started planning efforts this year, and we plan to continue next year. This was as a result of RFTA's, over the last few years, RFTA had invested some money to review its internal processes in terms of the administrative side, just to better, to look inward, to see what we could do better from an operational standpoint. And as one of the recommendations from GFOA, their consulting group, was to replace our current system and modernize it with a newer ERP system. And we recognize that I've been at RFTA since 2009, and we currently are using the same system that we had back then. And that was, and I know that a lot of organizations, as part of their growth and trying to modernize what they do, this is something that's important. It's obviously a large project that impacts the entire organization, but it's something that we just wanted to share with the board. As RFTA continues to grow, this is one of the necessary steps internally that we have to do. And we know that it'll take a little bit more effort for administrative support to get through the project and to continue beyond. So this is something that just wanted to share with you, with all the things that are going on with RFTA. This is something that we're trying to improve on too. Sometimes it's not really as exciting as buses or anything like that, but it is part of us trying to improve what we do. So,
Michael and Kurt, can I ask, will the board be updated on like systems chosen or consultant and stuff? I know the city of Glenwood has gone through this process over the last decade, and it's been quite painful and up and down. So just wondering if there's any.
Yes. So we have been communicating with all of those jurisdictions as well who've been going through this. And there's lots of lessons learned that we're able to gain from those conversations. We are working with GFOA, who has assisted with a lot of those deployments in some of our neighboring jurisdictions, and they're helping us guide us through that process as well.
Great.
The way the project works is there is a consultant team that was hired to implement the systems. I believe the product that we're using is called Workday. This is a system that Colorado Mountain College just recently went through the process of implementing for their internal systems as well. So it is a well-known and well-utilized system throughout the probably globe. So that's
Great.
what we've selected and
Thank
what
you.
we're moving forward with.
So the next few slides, the next two slides are really the strategic initiatives that have been incorporated, whether it's the first draft, that was roughly about the 5 million, and or the second draft. So we're definitely not going to go line by line. So if there's any ones that jump out, feel free. There's some IT stuff that we just got to get, whether it's firewall protection or going from Windows 10 to Windows 11, things like that are taking place. Some of during the strategic initiative process, anything that really on the operational side that's going up, like GMF 3457 operating costs, that will get submitted as strategic initiative. So you'll see some of those newer, whether it's the underpasses, whether it's Iron Mountain Place coming online, some of those O&M costs. Let's give it a few seconds that we're going through. Earlier, we talked a little bit about high priority strategic initiatives not included thus far in the second draft budget. So the first few is our GMF expansion project, phases 6A, 6B, and phases 8. Those are the big ones. One thing to note that we do have a capital grant associated with that, roughly 33 million. So if you kind of net those together, it's 22 million. The other big one is the GMF underground fuel storage tanks. I'm replacing those. We're looking at 7, and some of these, and some of the reason why they haven't been incorporated is we're still finalizing some of these numbers, the actual projection, and then looking at the overall O&M cost in the future years. Iron Mountain Place, we're looking at doing, we're just looking at doing the financing, roughly financing 14 million, kind of a lease purchase that will get those monies to use, and then there will be obviously annual debt service. So that first year will be about 510,000. AMF bus wash replacement. So currently we're doing some design work there, but it's going to be additional about 417,000 as the bus wash there has kind of hit its useful life. The ERP implementation. So we talked about the actual implementation on the capital side. So then there's going to be the ongoing operating and maintenance. So roughly about 450,000 is the actual that goes out to the third party. And then internally, we're looking at an ERP, IT administrator, as well as some finance support. The last item was kind of the housing policy and program implementation. That's a little TBD as we're going through that rent structure from the EPS study and implementing that. That hasn't been incorporated yet, as well as looking at housing stipend. Staffing, the real big change as we made some modifications on the staffing was this first draft had 182 full-time CDL drivers. This one, as we're matching up to the 2024, reduces 6 down to 176. So that was really the main change there. As we're talking about with this workforce housing, it gets a little small. I don't know if can you just enlarge the right side a little bit? Or is that going to be? A lot of color. It's definitely a lot of color.
Which one do you want?
The right side. So this is just as we're looking at, during this year, you'll notice like the black right there in the middle We did some one-off leases as we were kind of in that in-between transition with Iron Mountain Place. So a lot of those are going to slowly dissipate as we go through. So the very top is Iron Mountain Place. It's 42 units. This is kind of just looks at on a monthly basis how the budget looks like, how many beds are available for staff, for our employees. The low point right there during the summer months is 108 beds. And then one of the things is obviously as it gets down there, because we do have 10 seasonal units of 20 beds that we get from Burlingame, which we don't have from May through August. And so that's a drop. So there's been a lot of work going through as what exactly is that number? And then as we kind of look at some of these other non-RFTA owned properties, what does that future look like? So there'll be a lot more work going through this. I think there's a general comfort level. We want to maintain at least about 108 beds throughout the year for our staffing. And that just rotates as we go through. We've gone rented out for us about 70 employees. Right now, we're projecting to get closer to about 90 employees by year end.
And the takeaway here is that the yellow piece is Iron Mountain Place. That's the hotel conversion in Glenwood Springs that RFTA had acquired in the end of the year of 22. And I think that what that provides RFTA is that ability as we monitor what our needs are, if we need to phase out of any of the other properties, we have that ability to. But I think for now, we're taking a conservative approach to this is what we have envisioned in the budget. So.
And then just moving forward, just looking at the major goals, obviously, we're into the third year of the regional bike share plan. The continued first and last mile mobility, the 13 bus replacements in the ERP. This is kind of some of the major ones that are incorporated now. Fund balance, if you're looking at the graph on the left, obviously there's that dip between 23 to 24. In 23 is when we fully expended our capital projects fund through the 2021 bond issuance. And so we anticipated this. And so now we're using more of the general fund as these projects like the Glenwood expansion for phases 3, 4, 5, and 7, as they come finalized this year.
Right, and so just to add in 2025, as David mentioned, that large project with the GMF after that you net out the grant. Right now, the preliminary ballpark is somewhere in the, 20 million or so impact. So that could reduce this fund balance further in addition to that $7-8 million, the fuel, the underground storage tanks. And so the reason why we're just wanting to bring that to the board's attention. So while we continue on with our budget planning process for the third draft next month, we'll see if we have, if we're able to get better information between now and then to update the board on those projects. So that's the anticipation of what we expect to happen.
And then just looking at going into next steps, obviously, as Mr. Michael Yang, a lot of this is fine tuning, going through. One of the things with some of this stuff in the strategic initiatives, there's a good chance it's contingent on getting the CBA done. And so there is a potentiality that some of this stuff, until we get that done, that some of these strategic initiatives might flow into a request during the 2025 budget year. Any questions at this point?
Any questions for
I'd love
Dave
to
or the team?
ask if I could drill down a little bit on the bus purchases, the diesel bus purchases. Is that entirely funded by federal funding? Is that what we're anticipating or asking for? Or what's the percentage? What's the match?
At this point, we do not have any grant funds associated with those. We'll be pursuing grant funds still. And if for some reason we do find grant funds available, or sometimes the industry surprises us and they may come out with a vehicle that is battery electric or natural gas that we could pursue. But right now, at this point in time, we're anticipating lease financing for those vehicles.
Got it. So that's that full 18 million on us for the time being.
Yeah, just to add, there, RAFTA has, some of the grants that we have received for buses, it might be an 80-20 split, where RAFTA would cover the 20%. However, like the 10 BEVs that we have, I think there was no local match required. So that was like 100%. So we don't know. I think what, to Kurt's point, is we'll see what we could get and then update the board and adjust our financing plan.
If electric was available, my guess is they're about 150% of the diesel cost. Is that right? Or are they double the cost of diesel? So would this go up to 36 million if we had the chance to go electric, if it existed?
Well, being that there hasn't been an electric coach bus, we're not really sure what that number would be, but we're anticipating it would be high.
Be higher. Yeah, thank you. Okay, that's all.
Any other questions?
Yeah, a quick question, and I don't want to go too far in the weeds on this, but you said in 2021, we have to have a bond issuance. And now we're not, could you explain how that happened? What's that mean? And are we able to do something like that in the near future? And under what circumstances?
No, good question. Yeah, in 2021, RAFTA issued its first set of property tax revenue bonds to help fund portions of those large capital projects that we spoke of earlier. And RAFTA does have $45 million of bonding authority left from that 2018 ballot measure 7A. And so as part of RAFTA's long-range financing plan for capital, we have the ability to review PAYGO using cash or fund balances. For buses, we've typically looked for grant award and also lease purchase financing, because those lease purchase financing typically goes out closer to the life of the bus. And then we would preserve the bonding authority for larger scale capital projects. So right now, as RAFTA evaluates not like these projects that we're speaking about, but also continues to evaluate and reaffirm some of the Destination 2040 projects in there, then we could have a better sense of what and when, if we wanted to finance. I think because, as you've known, RAFTA has accumulated its fund balance over the last few years as a result of a combination of events. Sales taxes were higher than initially expected when COVID hit. There was a concern that sales taxes would drop 50%, if you recall, through federal programs for the COVID response to help stabilize the financial picture for agencies like RAFTA to provide the essential services. We were able to benefit from some of those federal programs, and during that time to help commit and have certainty with paying our workforce and continuing those services. As David shown, we had to actually run more service because of the capacity constraints. So as we look back, sales taxes did not fall as people initially thought. It actually grew. So while we were able to cover our operating costs with those federal grant funds, we were able to accumulate and build up our reserves using the additional sales taxes. But as you know, inflation hit, not just on our operating costs, but our capital costs. So, and we spoke to about it, that we did have to take bold measures to bump up our wages for our bus drivers twice during this past CBA agreement. The largest increase was in the summer of 23. And so we were able to use a lot of those additional resources to pay for those. And also as you've seen, we're drawing down on our capital reserves for some of these local share, for some of this capital projects. So it is a dynamic process and a lot of moving parts and pieces, but we do have bonding authority that we could tap into if we didn't want to use some of our fund balance. Right, so there's a lot of different aspects that we could use as we approach that.
Thank you, Michael.
I'd love to talk to you a little bit about, I don't want to take up more of the board's time, but really interested in also, are there ways to leverage the fund balance for financing things? But maybe we could talk about that offline.
Yep.
Okay.
No, thank you.
Thank you. Welcome, Ben. Any other questions for David or the team? Seeing none, I don't think we have action on this, but they'll look forward to seeing the third draft at the next meeting.
Yeah, thanks very much.
Thanks, David.
Yes, thank you.
Thank
Good
you all.
work.
Paul Hamilton will be back. Rest assured. I'll make sure to hear.
Kurt, well done.
Thank you.
Our seating assignment, wasn't it?
Yeah, we probably should have switched seats.
Right, okay, so next on the agenda, we have the first last mile mobility services, and I believe we're gonna kind of work through what we started at the last meeting, is how to get the funding sustainable for the next 5 or 10 years, however long.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. We, as those probably remember, we ran short on time last month to really have a robust conversation on how to move our first and last mile mobility fund forward. I know David is here today to continue that conversation, and hopefully we can reach a point where staff can get some guidance moving forward.
All right, thanks, everybody. See if I can get my screen to share the right screen. Sure if this is the right one or not. All right, look at that. All right, so as you may recall, at the August and September board meetings, we did cover a number of items related to the first last mile mobility reserve and grant program. So at some of the items that we have covered so far have been performance and trends and finances and policy that have led to the development and implementation of the program. So all I have for you here today is a brief presentation, is a reminder of where we left off from the September board meeting. So it's really the staff recommendation. I've got one additional slide to provide a little bit of background that I'll cover here as well, but this should only take a few minutes. There it goes. So looking at the first last mile mobility reserve grant fund options that were presented in September, we identified four options for consideration. The first one is essentially to continue the current seed funding program with FLMMR going forward. So as a reminder, this is 50% for up to 3 years of seed funding for operations, including microtransit, up to 50% for infrastructure. So these are usually one-time costs. And looking at the financial projections, it looks like we have enough funding to be able to cover this through 2029, which is a year past the expiration of the current 2023 to 2028 bike share memorandum of understanding. Options B and C that we presented are essentially prioritized grant requests or grant framework for the first last mile mobility program that first prioritizes the RFTA 2023 bike share MOU and SOA obligations. So this is what RFTA is contributing to the program, a portion of what RFTA is contributing to the program for bike share through those agreements. The second priority would be requests for bike share support from jurisdictions. Third priority would be requests for microtransit support from jurisdictions. And fourth priority would be a request for all other projects. That's things like infrastructure. And as a piece to this, the prioritization, we would also develop a key performance indicator or KPI for microtransit in particular to help direct funding for microtransit when we don't have enough funding to fund all of the requests. So the anticipation is that based on how well a specific system is serving RFTA's trunk line service, that would be reflected back to their portion of the funding that's available. And then that prioritization and the KPI is the same between options B and C that you see here. The main difference is how they would fund or provide eligible funding for microtransit in years 4 and beyond. So both of them propose maintaining the 50% funding for microtransit in years 1, 2, and 3. And whereas option B says that after year 3, so year 4 and beyond, would be funded at 20% of, or would be eligible for 20% of that system funding with no expiration on that. Option C says that years 1 through 3 would be funded at 50% as it is today, and they would taper off at 10% a year. So it would be 50% for the first 3 years, then 40%, then 30%, then 20%, then 10%. And then that system would no longer be eligible for FLMM grant funding. So that would increase it to a total of 7 years of eligible funding for microtransit as a part of option C. And then option D, this is essentially continuing to look for other funding for microtransit going forward. So if you recall from the previous presentations and packet material, in order to fund, excuse me, 20% of microtransit for Glenwood Springs, excuse me, for Glenwood Springs, Carbondale, and Basalt, that would be about $500,000 a year that we need to identify in funding. So those were the 4 options that were provided. They can be mixed and matched, particularly with option D. And I'll talk about that here more in some of the following slides. To look at option B and C in a little bit more detail, this is a slide that you saw in September as well. So looking at the graph here, the blue line represents the total cost of the microtransit system. So it was a little under $500,000 in 22 and 23 when it was just Basalt. Carbondale came online in 2024. That brought it up to close to $1 million. And then total cost is a little bit over $2 million by 2025 with Glenwood Springs on board as well. And then inflated that at 5% per year out going forward. So by 2031, we're looking at a total cost for those 3 systems at about $3 million. So the eligible cost portion of that for option B, so option B and C are the same for 22 through 25. That's just 50% of the total cost. And then option B tapers off, coming down to about $500,000 by 2028 as systems move down to the 20% eligible funding range. And then option C, that is the tapered approach. So 3 years at 50%, then 40, 30, 20, 10. That tapers off a little bit more slowly. So the jurisdictions are eligible for greater amount of funding in the nearer term, but lose funding in the longer term. So you can see by 2031, 2032, the current 3 systems would no longer be eligible for FLMM funding. So looking at some of the assumptions that come with option B and option C, with option B, it does make the assumption that we have a long-term funding source. I mentioned this in September, which we don't feel as though we currently have because there is not an end date on the 20% eligible funding. Option C does identify that, hey, we don't have that long-term funding source right now, but we also recognize the issues with jurisdictions being caught cold turkey with the 3 years of 50% funding and not being able to identify that long-term funding source. So it tapers it off, allows more time for the jurisdictions to identify long-term funding sources, allows the jurisdictions and RFTA 4 additional years for data gathering, which, as we've discussed at the previous meetings, is pretty important, particularly for microtransit at this point. And doesn't create the assumption that we have that long-term funding source in place. But looking at both of these options going forward, they both provide adequate funding for bike share going forward through 2028 through the remainder of the MOU. So we're not sacrificing anything with our bike share obligations with either of these. But it does looking at the available funding projections, we do anticipate that after 2025, we wouldn't have any funding available in the FLMMR for any infrastructure-related requests. So starting in 2026, it would be with either of these options, essentially all of the funding would be going to bike share or microtransit. So it really compresses the ability for the seed funding program to really branch out from those two programs. And then looking at funding availability as well for option B, we anticipate that we'd be able to do bike share and microtransit at the current rates through 2029 before the fund would run out of funding, and through 2028 for option C. And this is a new slide based on some feedback that I received based on the previous two presentations. And this is specifically looking at the two options, option B and C, how do they affect each jurisdiction in particular? And you can see on the left side, that is, so we've got the list of jurisdictions that are currently in the FLMMR program. And then the second to left column is looking at bike share grants. You can see there's no change for any of the jurisdictions when it comes to bike share grants through the term of, through 2029. And then microtransit, if a jurisdiction isn't currently in the program, there's currently no impact to them. So Aspen, Pickens County, Snowmass Village, and Eagle County, we're not anticipating any changes to any of those jurisdictions as a result of these options. So the real impact would be to Basalt, Carbondale, and Glenwood Springs, where they would be eligible for additional years of microtransit grant funding. And then on the right side, you can see the all other grants. Basically, as I mentioned before, the funding would really be steered toward bike share and microtransit. So if there is any funding available through recapitalization of the program, it would just be a reduced amount that would be available for any other seed funding opportunities coming forward, including infrastructure.
I could add.
Yeah.
One thing I do want to point out that the analysis that we're showing here on the previous slide and in this slide is only reflecting who's currently participating in FLMM. So that's showing what the projection would be is just of the existing partners, but we do know that there could be more partners. So Newcastle, for example, could be a partner that wants to participate in bike share, but also maybe micromobility. So that just compounds the issue that we have here because all of these projections are just accounting for who's currently participating.
Yeah, that's a good point. And looking at this slide in particular, you don't see Newcastle on here. And that simply, Newcastle is eligible for the First Last Mile Mobility Reserve program. However, we just haven't received any requests from them. So that's the only reason they're not listed on this, this slide here. So then looking at the final staff recommendation, as you may recall from the September meeting, we are recommending option C, which is the prioritized grant program. So as those applications come in, again, first prioritizing RFTA's obligation to the bike share program, then prioritizing requests for bike share, then prioritizing requests from jurisdictions for microtransit, then all other requests. Option C also includes microtransit eligibility at the tapered amount of 10% after the first 3 years. So that's 7 total years of funding for microtransit and then the development of the KPI for years of limited funding. We also propose tying this together with option D, which is continuing to look for that long-term funding source. So if we are able to identify a long-term funding source, we would come back to you with that, what that looks like to presumably amend this program to fit whatever that long-term funding source is. So this is really anticipated to fill the need that we have now. But if the landscape changes, this program as well can continue to evolve. I think that's all I've got, unless Kurt or Mike, you've got anything else to add?
That's great.
Thanks.
Yeah, and I would just want to speak to what are those possibilities of long-term funding? There could be, typically grant programs are not designed for ongoing operations and maintenance. They're typically one-time capital type investments. But we would look to go see if there are any types of grant programs, possibly through the state or at a federal level, that could assist. I think logically, we tend to look at what remaining taxing authority that RAFTA has. I think that would be a conversation that we'd need to have as a board of whether we would want to use any of that for these types of services, or if we'd want to preserve those for any larger mass transit expansion that we may want to do in the future. There's a number of other ideas that I know we've thrown out and kicked around in terms of other possible fees or taxes that could be pursued, but those are things that we'd definitely be open for discussion and looking for guidance from the board.
Just did want to make a comment. As tying back to what I was talking about from RAFTA's fund balance, during that time of accumulation, that's really when we started the first last mile mobility reserve fund. So we were able to, through the board's direction and just in anticipation of this need, carve out some of that to really test in our area some of these new concepts through this seed funding. So I think that's the great thing about what we've done to get to this point. We use some of those funds that we saved and the accumulated, but as David alluded to, the prioritization of that bike share is important to maintain, but also we can't continue, right? It's not a new revenue source, right? So, but that's how we initially got to where we are. So that's the just wanted to share that point with the board. Thank you.
Thank you. Any more comments, Doug?
No, I think at this point, we just love to hear the board discussion.
Yep. Any questions, Jeannie? Or comments? We're in discussion now for this.
We're in discussion. So, this is so interesting as we dive deeper into this topic. It's obviously a priority of the board, that we have this first last mile, that we have this micro transit, that we have the bike share program. And so I do think we should be looking for an alternative funding source for this. I believe that we should look at a lodging tax, which I had no idea until Dan mentioned it a couple meetings, 3-4 meetings back, that RAFTA, as a regional transit authority, is eligible to do a lodging tax. And if it just seems like we're trying to do it, they're trying to do all this micro transit and first last mobility, but we don't have the funding. And so we're trying to create ways to encourage. But I think, this came up when I was talking about the Northwest COGS 3-year study about this tension between the residents and the visitors. And what they found was 75% of the residents think that we should reallocate the current marketing and/or lodging tax to the impacts of the visitors. And if we were to say the visitors are paying their share and we're creating a robust first last mile program, and I have no idea what a lodging tax would possibly do for the RAFTA jurisdiction. But maybe it does something, it generates enough money that we can do some housing and some first last mile ideas. And so I think we should take the next year, use one of your options and take the next year to really think about how that could work, what it would possibly generate. I find that the residents, we don't have to do a big campaign, but it is actually a pretty easy message, is the visitors are paying their share. And that's why we're asking for this. So I'll stop there. I think lodging taxes are really cool. Now that they've opened them up from beyond, from beyond marketing, that you have to do marketing with it. But I find that it doesn't require a big campaign, that people understand that the visitors need to be paying some of the share of the impact. So I keep saying I'll stop, but I will stop.
Great. Thank you, Jeannie. Tori?
Lodging taxes are really cool. So cool that Aspen has already got some. So I don't know that Aspen would be looking at that as a revenue source for this.
What level is the Aspen tax? Just out of curiosity.
Well, we have a couple percentage points on lodging, traditional lodging.
Right.
And we have 5 or 10% on short-term rental.
Okay,
Lodging.
okay. Glenwood is at 5 on across the board.
Yeah.
Both. Ben?
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for the time, first of all, to have this discussion a little more broadly, and thanks for all the work that staff has done to get us here. I like where we're headed. I don't feel like we're quite there yet. I think that there probably needs to be some forum, some committee. We don't do that very often, but I feel like there needs to be some time to really dig into the weeds on this with a few interested board members and staff so that we can come forward with something that has the support of the board on the next draft. So that's one recommendation that I have. Just jumping right to where I'd like to see this head, like we all benefit when ridership on RFTA is accessible and easy and the easiest way to get up and down this valley. And we know that our member jurisdictions, I think we all operate so well with RFTA better than any other forum because we all come in and sort of take our local hats off and look at this regionally. But we're all very different, right? And we're all in budget season, so we're all seeing each other's budgets right now in the newspaper. Some of us hover around the $10 million general fund. Others of us are well above $100 million general fund. Like these are very different realities in which to fund a bike share program or a micro transit program. So I think typically we do a great job of coming in here and saying, we're going to take off that local hat and we're going to look at all this and we're going to treat everybody equally. I think this is different. I think Aspen, Pickens County, Eagle, y'all, everybody benefits if people in Carbondale can get to the park and ride, right? We get cars off the road. So we're all in this together. But when we start to look at this one little piece of it, it's current general fund projection is $12 million for next year. Our cost of running the whole microtransit system ourselves in a few years, if we get to that point, is $640,000. So we're looking at like 5% of our general fund to run that thing. Maybe that's not the best solution. I really appreciate where we've started with this, that like, maybe that's not the best spend of that. And so I love it that we've got the grant. I love it that we're gathering the data. I love it that we're, 50-50 for those first few years. But at any point when this drops off a pretty precipitous cliff, Carbondale's out. And then that hurts everybody. And I think if Newcastle comes in, it'll be the same story. I don't want to speak for Basalt, but I would guess that they have similar thoughts on that. And so I fully agree that RFTA should not be in the business of in town, zipping people around. I mean, we see people using microtransit and we cycle for all sorts of reasons getting around town. RFTA is not in that business. But I do think we have to find a way that there is a regional solution to the first last mile that's connecting to the trunk line, that's long-term, and that doesn't put that huge of a burden on the member jurisdictions, because otherwise it just won't happen. I like the KPIs. I like the data. I like a lot of those things. In Carbondale, I'd love to have time, again, outside of this meeting where we have a million other things to discuss, to really look at like, what's RFTA spending on the Carbondale circulator right now? And then, what we need to look at all that data and figure out. We're in this, if any of you, hopefully most of you rode RFTA to get here today, you know that without some sort of connection to the park and ride, it just doesn't work here unless you've got a car to park at the park and ride. So apologies for kind of being long-winded on this, but you can tell I'm passionate about it. I think it's a key thing that I think we started with a grant program because it was that moment in time that you mentioned we were accumulating funds in the general fund reserve. Let's get something started, but I don't think we should feel constrained by that as the mechanism for funding this. So I really like option D. I think we got to go there. I don't think the number is 500,000 that we're looking for. I don't know if it's a lodging tax. Like this is a bigger discussion. And you know, I understand from staff perspective, like you guys are charged with coming in here with a solution that kind of backs RFTA out of this and keeps RFTA focused on its core responsibilities. And I think there might be a little bit of a disconnect in at least some of our board, myself, on this, where I think we need to meet up, board and staff, couple of people, small group, whatever makes sense and follows our bylaws and all that, to dig in and come back with some ideas that get us toward long-term sustainable funding for connections to the trunk line, connections to the regional service. And it might look different for a municipality based on how much is a percentage of their budget or how much they're already contributing from their tax base, you know, that they're eligible to do to transit. I don't know what all those factors are, but I think we need to zoom out a little bit. I think we're on the right path, but I just want to make sure that we have time to come up with something that really feels right. So thank you for.
I can add a little bit of context to that. And thanks for that. I think that's some fantastic perspective. So the way we landed at this conversation here today, I mean, part of it is board interest. Another part is that Basalt is currently going into their kind of grace year, fourth year on microtransit, and they're in a situation where we need to figure something out, or you know, they're looking at some significant impacts to their microtransit services.
Right.
So from our perspective, we're looking at it as being, we need to put something in place so that we're not losing systems that we see could have value, particularly in the nearer term. So this option C, I don't think anyone is looking at as being the end all be all. We see it as a point where to more or less buy us time to continue to have those conversations. Without creating the impression that, hey, we've solved all the problems with this one iterative step.
Great. Thanks, David. And I see David Knight, you have your hand up.
I do. Yeah, thanks. I have similar feelings to what Ben expressed, so I won't repeat all that. But this is a solution in Basalt that is, I think, is serving the trunk line along with, you know, Connect and the We Cycle. I mean, it has a lot of other purposes too that people do use, like that was pointed out. So I'd like to figure out how we can fund this in the long term, interregional, sustainable way, or it's like kind of a solution that you know, makes this just another component to serving RFTA's overall trunk line mission. I think we need to figure that out, and I'd be happy to participate in that. That a subcommittee or whatever we come up with that makes sense. So you know, definitely put me on the list for that, because this is our last year coming up in 2025, the grace year, and you know, we've been talking about budgets, and I don't know where that would come from in our general fund. So I think that would be a loss for the system and for Basalt if we don't come up with some way to you know, a solution that makes sense and a funding source to sustain it. So let's try to make that happen. Thanks. And thanks
Great,
for all
thank
this
you.
data. It was good.
Thank you, David. Anyone else? Tori.
I would also volunteer to be on some sort of subcommittee. I think I said this in the last meeting last month, that what we're missing is some data and some information about what our ridership needs for service. And so I agree. I think we need to take a deeper dive into this, not just on the funding side, but on how we're going to utilize these funds to be most effective. And so I would love to participate in any first last mile conversations that we can organize.
Great. So it sounds like there's interest in creating a subcommittee. Other comments on that? So maybe, I don't know when the best time that is to do that, if you're ready now to start diving into this, or you want to wait till there's a little more data going into 2025? What do you think?
I appreciate where you guys are on this as staff, and I do get it. Like you're trying to avoid a termination of service or a kind of radical change for Basalt right now. So I agree that we got to keep that moving forward. What I don't want to do is lose momentum on this though, because this is a really hard one to get to where we are right now, where we've like built a little bit of a collective understanding, a sense of urgency. So I don't want to delay the moving forward with option C, but I also don't want to delay the bigger conversation. I think we need to move forward on both paths at the same time.
Okay.
Well, I agree with what Ben said earlier. The option C, I'm just not really excited about. This is a really successful program. The fact that we've leveraged millions of dollars at the local level to implement these services, this is really fantastic. If I'm Newcastle, I'm going, I'm not touching this program. Really? Where's the money come from? So I think it's really important that and Basalt's already there. Like, whoa, what do we do? So I think let's take everybody who's volunteered for a committee, I'll be on it as well. I think what staff has done is a nice way to set the tone and the framework, but there's not been a lot of local context to this. And I think that's really important because we're all slightly different. We all have different needs, and how do we meet those? Because at the end of the day, our big goal is getting people on transit, alternatives to the car. So how do we do that? And it's a slight disagreement on the trunk line being the only thing RAFTA deals with. I think it's all connected. Housing's connected. And the more we think bigger, I think we'll have better opportunities to try and solve this issue.
Great. Okay.
I would just like to add and respond to what Ben mentioned, that I think there would be a lot of benefit from a subcommittee in reviewing this topic, but I would also suggest in reviewing our formation IGA of RAFTA. We're about 25 years into it. There are things that have changed from when that was first established. There are some things that we've just been doing because that's what the IGA said 25 years ago. So I think that is within the purview of the board, that if there are some foundational understandings of what RAFTA does, what our core mission is, I think there is that opportunity for the board to review that and make amendments to that IGA.
Great. That sounds like something the board might be interested in doing coming up. But it also sounds like you have at least 4 volunteers for a subcommittee. So maybe you can reach out and start working with them on getting that formed and working together.
Absolutely. We'll get that organized and we'll be able to start reporting to the board.
Perfect. Okay,
And
thanks.
just a quick question on subcommittee, like, are there things in our bylaws that prevent us from having a certain number of members together outside of a public meeting? We need to notice it. I guess let's just be attentive to those. I'm sure staff will be. And I'd say let's commit to meeting for the first time before the next board meeting.
Okay, yeah, we'll work with Paul Tadoon to make sure we're complying with all of those rules.
Thanks.
Awesome. More meetings. Way to go.
Just what they need.
Way to go.
Nice.
Well, it sounds like a conversation about, that does RAFTA just do the main service in the trunk line versus branching out to some of these other areas is a good one for the board going forward. So, all right. If we're ready, let's move on to the next item. That's CEO update report. Kurt.
Yes. Thank you. We did want to just provide an update. We do have a ribbon cutting ceremony next week for the grand opening of the 27th Street Highway 82 underpass project. That is on October 15th. The event begins at 1 p.m. and goes to 2:30 p.m. That will be located at the southwest quadrant of the intersection there, the side of the property adjacent to the school district's property. There's a nice little plaza area there that we can gather and have that ceremony. So we do plan on having Senator Michael Bennett in attendance. We also believe Director Shoshana Liu from CDOT will be there, as well as members of the board who are able to attend that. And I believe there also will be a nice little ceremony where a local Glenwood bicycle group will ride through the tunnels and maybe even through a ribbon, I think. So we have those times now defined, so that's laid out there. happy to answer any questions that we have on that. I do have an item here that we did mention briefly during the board presentation, or the budget presentation, but Michael might have a few more words regarding Colorado State House Bill 24B-1001.
Yes, thanks, Kurt. This is something that David Carl covered during the budget presentation earlier today about just paying attention to some of the issues. And this was a result of the special session at the end of August. And so this is something that we're working with our bond counsel on reviewing. The bond counsel was, it's the same team that helped with RFTA's property tax ballot measure. And so one of the things that David Carl mentioned was this will impact really the 2025 tax year, which reflects, which means the 2026 collection year or RFTA's 2026 budget year, right? So not this cycle, the next cycle. And there's aspects of this legislation that will constrain the growth of the revenues from property taxes. There were some exceptions to schools, but unfortunately not to RTAs. And so that is something that we'll keep an eye on. There's, because it's so new, even working with the attorneys, there's a lot to uncover and unpackage and understand, especially with the calculation of how those caps work. And, if there are exceptions to work through. So that's something that I just wanted to bring to the board's attention. So there could be headwinds with respect to the growth rates of property tax revenues for RFTA. And I would imagine any other special district or any other local government that collects property taxes may, that's something that I know, I would imagine the staffs are looking at. It's still new, but just wanted to let the board know.
Great, thank you, Michael.
We also wanted to just make note and recognize that we were notified by the Federal Transit Administration back in April that we were a recipient of the commitment to sustainability by Federal Transit Administration. That formal presentation, though, occurred last week in Anaheim, California at the Transform Conference, which is a public transportation industry conference. And David Johnson, our Director of Planning, was in attendance. You can see in the picture, he's receiving our award from the Deputy Federal Transit Administration Administrator, Veronica Vanderpool. So we can, yes, if anybody would like to touch the trophy, you can pass that around.
Wow.
So is that reflective of all the work that's been done, but also the great plans that were adopted by the board?
Yes, exactly. That's what it was for.
Great.
Mhm.
Very nice.
We did tease David. He was in the photo. He was saying thank you to Veronica when they snapped the picture. So that's why he looks a little confused.
You need a cloth now to wipe all the fingerprints off, but all of our fingerprints are on this, and thank you for that.
We have begun including ridership performance data in the CEO report. I won't necessarily go through all of that. I will just note that currently year to date, we are 3.7% up in ridership over last year, 2023. So we are on a positive trend. We're anticipating being over 5 million by year end, but there are a number of metrics that we're including now. So if there are any questions, we'd be happy to talk about that. We have been also including a report on our 2024 work plan, the items that we have been keeping the board abreast of throughout the year. And then Mike provides his nice financial report. And we'd be happy to answer any questions if there are any on those items.
Thank you, Kurt. Yeah, if anybody has not had a chance to review the CEO report, it's really helpful. And I like some of the new graphs and charts you've put in there, Kurt. It's
Great.
helpful to see, was it ridership per hour or something on some of the lines? I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah, that's a standard metric that we keep track of.
Colin?
Just a quick question, Kurt, wondering if the tax question for that Dan was working on has seen any resolution or progress, or I connected him with Elizabeth, Representative Velasco, and I don't know if could you give any updates?
Yeah, I have not received any updates from Dan on that activity. I think the legislature was at a session for a period of time, so I don't know how much progress they're able to make on that, but I will get an update from Dan for our next meeting.
Great. And then just one other thing. So I just wanted to thank the Trails staff for putting together a great tour, looking at the corridor and any infractions on our property. And we've made some major progress. We got a garbage container thing moved. So thank you, staff. It's been several years in the making and moved a berm. And kudos to the staff and Brett for the repaving. I know they wanted to do some other areas, but there's some water issues that are impacting the trail. Next year, I suggested we try and do Friday, Saturday instead of Wednesday, Thursday to see if we can get more people doing. It's a phenomenal tour. You get a lot of detail. The e-bikes make it so easy to get anywhere on that trail. And then we actually were able to have lunch and chat. So real lot of fun. So I really encourage board members to take advantage of the trail. It's a key asset that RFTA owns. It's connecting the region with transit and trails. So kudos to the staff for organizing that and all the work that they've been doing. And I think moving staff around and creating a more kind of coherent administrative side to the trails work has paid off. So thanks to the team and everybody who's been involved in the trail work.
Great. Thanks, Colin. Any other comments on the CEO report? If not, I believe we are moving into executive session. Thank you very much, Kurt. And do we need to clear the room or we need a motion?
Motion to go in executive session
Go in.
as articulated pursuant to CRS 246402-4E. Determining positions that may be subject to negotiations, developing strategy for negotiations and instructions for negotiators in connection with the RFTA ATU collective bargaining agreement process.
Thank you. Do we have a motion? So move.
Or I'll second.
Okay, moved by Jeannie, seconded by Alyssa. And so we will clear the room, get ready for that.
Trying to keep it as neutral as possible and not necessarily use the media to negotiate. We'll respect, trying to respect the process in terms of finding resolution.
Great.
Just to add,
Okay, last comment. I think we need to move on.
just to add,
Michael?
Kurt alluded to it, but we did reach out to our service contract partners with 2 updates. So that includes the staff at the city of Aspen, the staff at city of Gilman Springs, Picken County, Aspen Skiing Company, even staff at Garfield County, Rifle, any of the partners, even the Forest Service. So we've reached out and communicated to them and invited any questions or did further discussions. No one has asked for any more like a meeting or a call yet, but that's, so I just wanted to share with you that we've reached out to them twice.
Great,
Just
excellent.
keeping them up.
Thank you.
Right. I was just going to ask for that. If the partners are all involved, so nothing will be a surprise to them regardless of the outcome in January. There won't be a surprise. And so they can be prepared however they need to. And finally, communication with the public. I'm assuming we still are under, we will try not to say a word and run everything by Kurt to be our communicator on this topic. Is that correct?
I believe that would still be Paul's recommendation.
Yeah, our philosophy is that the board should speak with one voice. And if anybody wants to communicate with the board, They should do it while all the board members are listening so they can hear the same complaint or suggestion at the same time.
Okay,
Thank you.
great.
Because otherwise, in my view, there's a great possibility for miscommunication and we lose track of it.
Right, so it should either be at a board meeting or through
Yes.
through the CEO. Okay, thank you. I think that concludes our executive session unless anybody has anything else. And we are at 11:01, so we should probably move out of session now.
To go out of executive session.
Second.
Second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? No. Okay, thank you very much, Kurt, and thank you, Sarah. And we wish you the best on this mediation. And
I don't know if there's anybody outside who wants to come back.
We'll,
Okay, how do we get, God, we were ahead and now we're behind.
now we're just a little bit.
Slightly.
behind, Yep, just slightly, but we're just about at the end. This last one hopefully can go pretty quick. Paul, did you want to
Well,
update
there's
the board?
one thing I wanted to discuss with you. I think it's Kurt would present it, but this is a matter of board governance because you have a vacancy in the chair. And the bylaws provide that the vice chair takes over when there's a vacancy. Then the question becomes, what do you do with the vacancy? And my observation is we got 2 meetings before your organizational meeting in January. And also that there are elections occurring with your constituent jurisdictions. And that the preferred approach might be to not fill the board chair, but wait until January and allow the vice chair to perform the services of the chair in accordance with the bylaws until the January meeting. There's also in your bylaws a restriction on terms so that each chair and vice chair can only serve 2 consecutive terms, one term and another term. And question becomes, if you appoint somebody to fill the term of the vacancy, is that going to be 1 year and preclude the ability to go on for another 2 years? So it seemed to me that the best course of action would be to defer the question of filling the chair position until all the elections occur and you have a fresh board in January, and that we just operate in accordance with the bylaws, which would be that the vice chair acts in place of the chair when the chair position is vacant. Hope that makes sense to you.
Does that make sense to everyone? Any comments or questions?
Then there's one other issue, as I understand it from Craig, is that Shelley, as a representative of the RFTA board, you serve on the Housing Coalition.
I do also on the West Mountain Regional Housing
Right,
Coalition.
so then the
Yeah.
question there becomes, for the next couple of months, would that be filled? And should the chair, acting chair, fill that position until January as well, or somebody else?
Is there someone else
Yeah.
who's interested?
This
I know
this is board
Colin
governance.
serves
You have
on.
a lot of discretion.
Shelley, I'm sorry, but you can't leave.
Yeah.
Oh,
Way too many
He's
holes to
afraid
fill.
of what might happen.
Way too many holes
I can
to
see the
fill.
fear in his eyes.
they would love to have you on the Housing Coalition. Sorry.
Did you just volunteer for something?
I think that question could wait as well.
Yeah, it's
Okay.
up to you. I mean,
There's
yeah.
no rush, wait till January.
And Colin, you serve on that coalition for Carbondale, right? So you could update the board. I thought that might be an option for
Yeah,
that
I
too.
mean, the advantage of showing to that she's already Glenwood
Mhm.
and then does RAFTA. So we can talk, it's not, I don't think it's crucial coming into the end of the year, so we can wait.
Okay.
Okay.
That solves that.
All right. Does that solve that? Do we need to pass a resolution or?
Well, there is a resolution if you want to adopt it that was prepared that basically states what I just said. That the vice chair will assume the position of the chair in accordance with the bylaws.
Okay.
So moved.
The move. Do we have a second? We have a motion and a second by Tori
Further
Hey.
discussion?
Any discussion?
No.
No
No
discussion.
I expect to be thoroughly trounced by my opponent in this election. So, that's hanging.
The imaginary opponent. Is that all right. Okay, well, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none.
Yes.
She was here. Okay.
Oh, yes. So do we have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Rating, second. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
To use the gavel. Now can I?
Done there. Oh, you can pass it to me, but I'm handing it back because it goes on your plaque.